power in the region needs to be contained, held back, and taught a lesson. And I'm pretty glad the American administration turned around from coddling him over Syria to warning him over Syria almost overnight. But that change is a very important change. We need our Kurdish friends on Turkey's border to keep Erdogan honest. Energy. Israel by now has significant energy findings offshore. Gelder used to joke about Moses, great prophet, lousy navigator. 40 years in the desert gets us to the only part of the region which has no oil. Well, turns out he knew more about it than she did, but it was, the parting of the sea. It's offshore, it's major, it's big enough to make us rich if we will use it wisely, and jointly with Egypt, with Cyprus, and with our other neighbors. Military exercises, that's important. We do them together nowadays. Preparations for emergencies, that's another E if you want. Economic cooperation, that's another factor. And the environment, the Mediterranean is a fragile piece of water. And we need to do what we can to keep it in good order. And finally, for us in Israel, Europe, it's very important to have friends, real friends, in Europe. And it's interesting that Cyprus is led by a right-winger, center-right. So he and Netanyahu have plenty of issues that they share in terms of policy. But Greece, another friend, is actually led by a very left-wing politician, Alexis Tsipras, more or less right now the most left-wing European politician in power. And both of them are joining us in putting together this Eastern Mediterranean vision. So these are, I think, important strategic moves that redefine even the most basic question. Where is Israel? Israel is an important player in an Eastern Mediterranean region that's awakening to the challenges and learning to work together. Thank you.
We do have some questions.
I imagine so.
Two that are really related concerning the upcoming election. Do the centrist party and the Likud party have any major differences on foreign policy in dealing with the Palestinians? And which party is currently leading in the polls? And said another way, could you comment on the present and future impact? No, that's not. If the second question related, if Netanyahu loses the election, how will the new administration change policy? Somewhat the same question.
Well, prophecy is been given over to fools no, honestly, I think that in Israel you have to always count two different things. The size of the actual parties, but since we have proportional representation, also the size of the respective alliances of parties, center-right, center-left. I can see a situation, it looks right now that the challengers, Benny Gantz, former Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Reserves Benny Gantz, and his party will get more votes than Netanyahu's Likud party. However, the Likud and its right-wing allies, the array of right-wing allies, may get the 61 seats in the Knesset that would make it impossible for Gantz to dictate his terms. That is hanging fire. It's hovering at 61, 62, it could go below, it could go further up, but I wouldn't be surprised if we end up on the 10th of April with the Likud and the array of ultra-Orthodox parties and right-wing parties having the 61 necessary for governance. Having said so, I would expect that Netanyahu's first preference would not be a coalition government with his natural partners, maybe the ultra-Orthodox, but not the hard right, because he wants his hands free to give a guarded yes a conditional yes to the Trump proposals when they're put on the table. So his first choice, I believe, to the extent possible, would be to ask Gantz to join him in a government of national unity. Of course, the same is true the other way around. But in that case, if Netanyahu falls below 60, Likud does poorly, if the bloc goes below 60 and Likud does poorly, he is still the leader of the party, but he would be under immense pressure to step down and make it possible for Gantz, again, to build a broad coalition government of his party, blue-white, and Netanyahu's Likud, and again, I would say, sustain a policy of saying a guarded yes to Trump and managing the conflict intelligently. There are nuances, no major differences on these issues between Netanyahu, I'm going to be very clear, between Netanyahu and Gantz, and all the current mud-slinging campaigns on both sides, depicting Netanyahu as a crazy right-winger who cut a deal with very nasty elements in order to stay in power, and Netanyahu's depiction of Gantz as a crazy leftist. I mean, if you know both, and I've come to know them, I think this is all political campaigning driven by the media advisors on how to besmirch the other side. However, within Likud, the Likud base is to the right of Netanyahu, and if he ends up being beholden to the far-right parties, it could make a difference. They could become more and more hostile to the possibility of even proper conflict management, not to mention the Trump proposals, which are compromise proposals. And I think we should never be in a position where Israel rejects a reasonable compromise. The Palestinians will reject it out of hand. We know that. There is not an Arabic word for compromise, really. Unfortunately, I've once heard a PLO representative in Europe being interviewed on an Arab radio station, and he stumbled, in the end he said, a compromise. He couldn't find an Arabic word for the term. So that's a problem. But we shouldn't be put in the same situation, and I hope the dynamics, the post-election dynamics, point in this way. There is a question of whether the Arab parties could be in a coalition. I don't believe that blue-white will ask the Arab parties to join a coalition, not because they're Arab, but because the current array of Arab parties in Israel, we had one in the previous Knesset, there will be two in the next Knesset, they're split, are committed to the proposition that the Zionist project was a crime. That they support the basic Palestinian narrative. And when they do that, they rule themselves out as legitimate partners in the coalition government. If in the future we have an Arab party that represents the real needs of the Arab population of Israel, the 18% of Israel that are Muslim, and some Christians and so on, focusing on their daily needs, on their future, not on the conflict, I believe they would be legitimate partners, but not the present crew. So that basically means that even if Gantz comes clearly on top, the one viable option he will have for governing the country would be in partnership with a post-Netanyahu Likud. That's my analysis.
We don't have a lot more time, but I do have a couple of questions here that might just require you to respond briefly. Are the long-term Palestinian residents of Israel permitted to vote in national elections?
Yes. They have about 10% of the Knesset in the one party, two parties in the next election. They are very vocal. There is a Supreme Court, actually the Supreme Court judge who delivered the results of the previous election, was the chairman of the previous election commission, was a Christian Arab. The Israeli Arab citizens are citizens in every respect, except that the argument is about whether or not they should have rights as a national minority, as a distinct nationality within Israel as a state. And on this, there is a running debate today. Most Israelis would say that they are entitled to full citizenship, but their national aspirations should be expressed in the Palestinian state if and when that comes about through negotiations.
Here's a question that I don't think I've ever heard being addressed. Considering that several Africans have been threatened to be placed in jail if they do not leave the country in 90 days, I'm assuming referencing Israel, how do you respond to the idea that being pro-Israeli is also being anti-black?
Oh, God knows. First of all, we have a black Jewish population, Ethiopian population in Israel. Moreover, people who came over into Israel, legally speaking, and even those who come from countries where repatriation would place them in danger, can safely stay in Israel, even if they came in illegally. But people who cut the border to come in for economic reasons, illegally, and come from countries which they can be safely deported to, will be deported to whether they are Romanians, Chinese, or Congolese. It is entirely, the color of their skin is entirely beside the point.
Thank you. I think you've addressed this question, but I'll ask it again. Could you comment on the present and future impact of Russia's presence and foothold in Syria?
Excellent. When the Russians came in September 15, to save Assad's neck, because the Syrian regime was falling. I was in, as I said, I was in Siberia just before that, and I could sense their anxiety, their fear, that one more client of theirs in the region is going down. Although every time I spoke to my Russian counterparts at the time about your friends in Syria, I got a Siberian icy response saying, we don't have friends in Syria. I said, okay, your clients. Your clients, I think the reason why Putin invested so much in saving Assad's neck, in addition to the base, the naval base and the air base they got in northern Syria, Tartus and Khmeimim, is also in order to show the world, look, how good a lawyer I am. My client stayed off the gallows. Look at what happened to Mubarak. Look how the American administration, the Obama administration, threw an ally of 30 years down out the window like a sick cat. And here I am, and this guy is obviously a schmuck of the first order, forgive my language, but I have saved him from the gallows, which means I'm a good lawyer. I don't know what's the Reading equivalent, but I used to say if anyone saved Cleveland abductors from jail, he would have been a nasty human being, but a very good lawyer, right? So that's basically Putin. Now, so Syria became immensely important for him. Look, the bear is a bear. It's a big animal. Israel is a small animal, so we treat bears with respect. But let's remember that this is a bear in a cage. On one side, there's a nation 10 times as many people, which is rising to be the largest economy in the world. It's called China. And on the other side of Russia, there's an alliance called NATO with 20 times the GDP of Russia. There are less Russians today in the world than Nigerians, and the Russian economy is, in total size, smaller than that of South Korea. So you don't conquer the world with this, but you can get Syria and make an impression. So, since this is so important to them, we go to Russia and we say, look, you want to save Assad's neck? None of our business. We are not going to go to Syria and organize a new order there. That's not what Israeli mothers have sired their children for. But if you allow, and we have a very pleasant conversation because the Russians know that we are among the nations left around who still remember that Ribbentrop was worse than Molotov. In this historical discourse about who did wrong in Europe, we are still, we still remember that the Red Army liberated the camps. There's even a monument in Netanya to the Red Army as liberators. It was inaugurated during Putin's term. He came to Israel for the event. So the conversation begins pleasantly. Also, 1/6 of Israel speaks Russian. So the Russians think of us as sons of the homeland. And that's okay with me. But once we get into the room, it's daggers. We say this. Look, you want to save this smelly bastard's neck. That's your business. You made your choice. But if he allows his country to become a staging ground for Iranian designs against Israel, against Jordan, against regional stability, we're going to hit him so hard that you may actually lose your investment. So it's up to you to make sure that he doesn't make that mistake. And that's the ongoing conversation we continue to have with Putin.
I think we'll stop there.
Watch yourself. Okay.
Dr. Lerman, we'd like to thank you so much for presenting today. We thoroughly enjoyed it. Please come back again.
I'll come back again and, with pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I want to also thank the Jewish Federation of Reading for helping us out today and getting Dr. Lerman to present. Just a couple quick announcements. Our excursion, our bus trip to Philadelphia is coming up April 10th. We are going to the Foreign Policy Research Institute to hear Ron Granieri talk about the Trump presidency and historical perspective. Then we're headed to the Penn Museum for 2 amazing tours. I love it. Ancient Alcohol, A Taste of Bygone Booze. And global guide tours of the Middle East galleries, where we have people from that part of the world presenting and giving us the tour. It's Wednesday, April 10th. We would love to have you sign up. Yeah. Also coming up in April 17th, our luncheon will be here. Pristine Seas, the National Geographic Society, will present with Dan Myers. In addition, April 24th, we will have a Brexit breakfast with Dr. Randall Newham from Penn State. So we look forward to seeing you at all of those events. And please, if you can, pick up your membership cards and join early. We would appreciate it. And the flyers that are in the stands on your table, you're welcome to take those with you. Not the plastic, just the flyer. And keep that as reference for future events. Thank you so much for coming today. Appreciate it.